Hi there, I'm Danny, spiritualtherapist.com. And today I am absolutely thrilled to bring you one of my closest friends in the world, a psychotherapist of 20 years, somebody who will absolutely blow your mind with her infinite knowledge. And one of the main reasons for doing this broadcast is to really bring love to you, bring healing to you, bring health and wealth of health to you, teach you so many different healing modalities that you can do on your own. And before we get into that, and before I introduce this beautiful woman, Lou Lebentz, I want to tell you something that happened in her past that really propelled her onto the path of healing and becoming a globally known, and certainly across Great Britain, she's one of our best ever therapists. When Lou was out on an adventure in her career in the rag trade, which is the clothes trade, she was at a clothes show exhibition in London. And surrounded by celebrities and models, they could all see how fun she was, and she's a bit of a laugh. And anyway, she was drinking a cup of coffee. And the next thing she knows, she's waking up in an ambulance 48 hours later because she suddenly had some kind of a psychotic break. She's walking, wandering around the whole of London, trying to put the buzz back into Britain, because in her mind, everything that was happening was completely real. Now, tragically, it turns out that the fools that were surrounding her, thinking she's all that in a bag of chips and a great laugh, they spiked her drink. They spiked her coffee with LSD. So think on this for a moment. Those of us that know we've taken LSD, that's one thing. But those of us that have had a drink spike, that's a whole other thing, isn't it? Now, I'm going to bring Lou Lebentz on, and she's going to continue her story in her own words. Welcome, Lou Lebentz. How are you, my love?
I'm very good, and I'm very delighted to be here. And it's just lovely to see you, as always. And I feel very touched about the intro. So I hope together today, for those of you watching, we might be able to help you in some way. But yeah, that was a great introduction. I'm going to tell the story better myself. Yeah, fantastic.
Well, continue, because there's some really good bits. I'm going to take all of the.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? I suppose, many people listening might go, oh my God, that's just so awful, and being spiked. And it wasn't the first time I was spiked either. I was spiked at 19, younger as well, with Rohypnol. So this was my second spiking at 24. And I don't know, I think it took me 10 or 15 years, because I was pretty unwell. I mean, I was in an old kind of mental asylum, they were called. I am going back a bit, in a leafy London suburb. And I was locked in, I think, for 2 or 3 weeks, and couldn't walk, couldn't talk, couldn't make a cup of tea, just sort of dribbled and shuffled about. And Lou. I do remember, and it was really amazing. I do remember, the psychiatric meds kicking in, and I do remember the memories feeling like they were falling back into my head one by one. That was a really interesting point of my, dare I say, I prefer to call it a spiritual awakening now, Danny, actually.
Of course.
It kind of was, because I had the most incredible things happen to me. I phoned a radio station in my psychosis in London, and actually ended up speaking to a woman called Claire Ashford, who 10 years later, I worked at the same radio station and worked next to Claire. She was still there. And I never said, I phoned you in the middle of my psychotic break.
So you actually called her a real person. So let's go back a little bit. So let's explain what is psychosis, what is a psychotic break for those that don't know, and then explain the journey when you're off your rocker on LSD, but you didn't know a thing.
No, well, I didn't think I was off my rocker at all. I thought I'd found sanity, and that I was the sanest person in the world. I thought that my previous 24 years I'd been off my rocker, which is why I always joke, what's madness and what's sanity? Because let me back up a bit. I mean, psychosis is when we lose touch with reality. So we have audio or visual hallucinations, or we think things are happening that aren't happening, and we kind of lose our identity. And, you know, it can be brought about by many things, you know, drugs and alcohol, one of them, and cannabis, etc., etc. But mine was brought about by LSD, but whether it had been brought about by LSD or alcohol or anything else, because I was a massive drinker at the time, whatever happened to me would have probably happened because I'd had a bucket full of untreated trauma. And, you know, with psychedelics and untreated trauma, you know, when we have a body that's very dense, that hasn't done, that we're quite disconnected from, because maybe our earlier years or our childhood or our teenage years, you know, we've got lots of incidents of not really liking ourselves, not being in our body. Yeah, we have quite a dense energy field, and something like a LSD or a hallucinogenic sometimes is just too strong. It kind of blows the lid off. And for me, my psychosis or awakening felt like the lid was blowing off, you know, that everything just went, hence the memories slotting back into my head. But, you know, in my psychosis awakening, I was great. In fact, I was probably greater than I ever was before. I've probably ever been since, because, you know, I was putting the buzz back into Britain, as you said, and, you know, I was saving the world from drugs and alcohol, which was quite interesting, because then, you know, after my stint in radio, I then went and worked in rehab for a decade. So the only part of my mad night in the middle of my psychosis that hasn't come true yet, and I say yet because it's been a vision or a part of my psychosis or what happened to me at 24 that's kept me going through the thick and thin, that's got me to work on myself, has been a vision of me, believe it or not, standing on a stage in the middle of blooming Oprah Winfrey and the Dalai Lama. Yeah. Now, how mad and mental is that? But it was something that spoke to me. It was a symbol. It was I don't know what it was, but it was a dream or a vision or a mission that for a 24-year-old, let's face it, pretty unwell girl that hated herself and had been through so much trauma, it was kind of when I woke up to the psychosis, because again, you know, 24, you go back to sleep. I went back out there at 25. I kept on drinking. I didn't do the inner work on myself yet. You know, when I woke up in my kind of early mid-30s, it was that psychosis that was my salvation. It was that psychotic break, really, that was the turning point. Because, you know, we all know, don't we, those of us on a healing journey, that sometimes we have to get to our own rock bottoms or have our own turning points or defining moments, because we're all on our own hero's journey, whatever mad vision it is that we might be chasing.
That's true. And your story is so remarkable, and it's just so uplifting to see that you went through so much from childhood to teens to young 20s. And like you say, we're trying to cover up and, you know, densify everything so you didn't have to look at it, numbing out, self-medicating with alcohol and whatever. And then these terrible people, because I say terrible because so many children, adults, etc. around the world, their drinks are spiked for terrible, shocking reasons.
I know.
And not knowing that, you know, you didn't even know that, you know, it wasn't like a choice of taking a drug. So when your psychosis happened and the lid blew off, as you said, it opened you onto such an awareness, even though you went back, but then you later studied as a psychotherapist. So you gained everything you went through. You've been dealing with people's issues in those veins. with those terrible traumas, because you have the deepest well in you of empathy and love and compassion and joy, and right before we got on, we were discussing, that, being a therapist, it's so up and downsy. It can be so up and down. I had someone the other week, I'm doing some work with a mum and a teenage boy, and I was being very loving and kind to the teenage boy, but sometimes, you've got to give someone a gentle little oi.
Yeah.
We don't hit mummy, 14 years old. And then he went and shut himself in the bathroom for 2 hours. Oh my God, I had to rescue a client one time, and from a private school in Switzerland. Their parents were in America. I was in England. They flew me out there. I was concerned about this young girl. I had taken her to this beautiful hotel. She locked herself in the bathroom for 2 hours. I couldn't get in there. It is really hard on us therapists at times, because I don't know about you, like yesterday I'm working with a beautiful couple, a married couple, and they're just so breaking through in their marriage, and they both start bawling and they're hugging each other and kissing each other, and I'm crying my eyes out, and I'm like, I love you too.
Yeah,
you just can't help it. It's such
that's amazing. That's amazing. But it's really easy, isn't it, for us to love people in their vulnerable parts, when they can show the emotion and when they can be open and get there. And what's more difficult for all of us, I think, to love or be around is those parts of us that want to fight, are those survival strategies. And I always teach people, that with trauma, and Danny, sometimes people think that trauma is like a rape or, childhood sexual abuse or, a tsunami or a war zone or, 9/11. They kind of get this thing that trauma has to be this one-off massive event that happens to you. But actually, that's not trauma. That's not really the definition of it. The definition of trauma is something that happens inside of you. So it's not about what happens out there. It's about what happens internally. And it's your sense of being able to deal with it, or what overwhelms your nervous system. And more overwhelming to a lot of people's nervous system is their first few years of life, and how regulated or unregulated their parents are, and how soothed their nervous system is, and how much kind of co-regulation and attachment they get. Because if they don't get that, they've already got a nervous system that's a bit more susceptible to then later traumas, not having that strong, solid foundation. So trauma, you don't have to have been raped or been in a tsunami. You might have just felt that maybe one of your parents or both of your parents weren't really there, or weren't really engaged emotionally themselves, or able to deal with their own stuff. And that's enough to create a little bit of dysregulation, because that's what I call trauma really these days, is it's a dysregulated nervous system. That goes into fight. We go into our fight, we go into fleeing or flighting, we go into freezing. Your person, behind the door, it's kind of flight, freezing, getting out the way. Or we go into flop, which is just submit, helpless, hopeless, don't move. Or we go into my personal favorite, and I did this for years. I don't know what I was like at 40 when you first met me, however many years ago. Mine was friend, which is the please appease codependent.
Yeah.
Oh, let me make it all better for you, and how can I please you? So all those survival strategies are how I see clients a bit through those lenses of, they're not really fighting me. They might feel like they are, but they're not really fleeing from me. What they're trying to do is they're trying to regulate a very dysregulated nervous system and get away from pain.
Yeah. Yeah, get away from
Like
pain.
we all are, like all of us human
That's
beings.
how our brains are wired. Our brains are wired to move away from pain, to not face the pain. You know, in terms of therapy and different therapies that are available and that you do and that I do, I want to say two things. I want to send so much love out to all the therapists at every label: psychotherapists, psychologists, hypnotherapists. I mean, everyone that brings love and tries to bring care to humanity. Bless you all, and keep going. Don't give up. You know, there's a lot more people now who need our help, or need you to help point them in a direction of self-healing, which is what Lou and I are going to be doing. I also wanted to mention that Lou Lebentz and I actually had our own clinics in London's Harley Street. And
we did.
That is something, right? That is
Remember
like,
we used to share cabs and stuff. Black cab.
Oh, good morning, Lou. Good morning, Danny. Where are you off to? My clinic in Harley Street. Why don't you know? Because up until that time, it wasn't really available to therapists. It was available to the doctors and the surgeons and the awfully wealthy off people. You know, the bumbling ones, you know, the chinless wonders. Oh, I'm off to Harley Street. When it was our turn, it was like, we rock, we roll, we're going down the road to Harley Street. It was a big deal. Now, I've lived in Canada, America, Costa Rica, England, and anywhere I go in the world, nobody else knows what Harley Street is. You know, had a clinic in Harley Street.
And you know, you get to the point, don't you, where it doesn't really matter anymore either.
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. Yeah. It's like the Jimmy Choo shoes I never ever bought. You know what I mean?
I've never had a pair either.
Right. Or the Louboutin, or, you know, Christine Lacroix, or all beautiful, you know, fantasize at one point, move along, look back, didn't even miss it. And
well, it's a really nice segue into what I think is really important, and that's kind of the thriving aspect. Because, you know, when I think of Jimmy Choo's, I go straight back to, I can't remember how many years ago, but I did India one year, and I did 6 weeks in India, and, you know, traveled around quite a lot, and was quite overwhelmed by the poverty. I think it really touched me. And then it might not have even been a year, it might have been a few months later, I was in Florida, and I got taken to a auction, a charity auction, dog charity auction at Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump's place at Palm Beach. And I remember sitting amongst, and there was a Jimmy Choo stand, you know, and there were lots of people there in their own Jimmy Choos. And, you know, I'm kind of going into the Harley Street and the Jimmy Choos and the India and the poverty thing, because, you know, a lot of what we think is thriving or is doing well or is important is actually these days very much based on the importance that we place on names or labels or acquisitions or things. But actually what we're talking about, and trauma and all the rest of it, and healing, the more healing you do and the more you come into yourself, the less all those things matter, you know, because the people that I met at Mar-a-Lago that day, you know, in their Jimmy Choos, weren't the most happy people, some of them that I met, despite all their acquisitions and what they had. And part of the reason really that I set up Trauma Thrivers was to try and get people to think what is thriving and what is important. And important to me is having really good mental health, is really learning to like yourself on this journey, to learn who you are, to go towards the pain and be able to stay with it. You know.
Yeah, incredible, absolutely incredible. What a journey. So Lou, I want to go to your book because it's such a incredible treasure chest for free, everybody.
It is for free. It is for free. I mean, if you buy it, sadly, on Amazon, it's not, because the print costs, I think, are quite expensive. But if you go to traumathrivers.com/ebook, you can download it all for free.
Yeah, and all the details are underneath this video. Lou, can you hold it up again, please?
Yeah.
So we can take a look at the title, The Solutions to Trauma Series. And how many did you yourself, you've studied all of these, you've used these all on clients. Can you talk a little bit about some of the therapies in there that people can self-help
I've
with?
got to be honest, Danny, I haven't studied all 56.
Well, I'd be rather worried if you had.
So would I. I think it might take more than one lifetime. Yes. But it's got psychosomatic trauma treatment. So like EMDR and things that we know, sensory, motor, brain spotting. It's got alternative holistic. So NLP, EFT, havening. It's got body work and nutritional things like acupuncture, rolfing, homeopathy. And then it's got new technological and online approaches. So things that are out there now, like biofeedback or heart rate variability or heart math, things that you can buy. I think I normally have touch points, which are little wrist things, or alpha stim. So they're just different ways of working with the nervous system that you can do yourself. So some of these 56, you'd have to do with a therapist or a clinician or a coach or a body worker that were trained in that process. But I created it really because I just think there are so many roads to Rome, aren't there? And there's so many different ways of healing, and not every way suits each of us. We're all so unique. And also, I don't think that there's ever one way.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Different parts of the body, different parts of the psychosymptomatic system, the nervous system, depending on what you have gone through. And everyone's gone through something, and some more than others. And there's a lot of adults now trying to come to terms with memories they've had of severe sexual abuse and trauma. There are some adults who've never suffered that, but are having false memories of that for lots of impact, over watching things, getting overstimulated, and that's covering something else up. There's so many things that people are going through. This book that you are giving away, Lou, you're just unbelievable. You know, you're just unbelievable. I said yesterday, I was on with my friend, the doctor and scientist, Dr. Mangia Samantha Lawson, and I was saying, the one thing I will brag about in my life is the bloody incredible, beautiful, amazing people I know. Like my friends, not just acquaintances, but my actual friends.
Yeah.
You know, the people that I've got a heart bond with. And I'm like, oh my God, I've got this little channel on YouTube, and I don't care for the numbers. I want people to get help, to have techniques, to fill themselves up with something, with people like you, you know. It's amazing.
But ever since I've known you, Danny, you've got a huge heart too. Like one of the biggest I know. And the other thing that I love about, I mean, there are many things I love about you, but the other thing that I love about you is I never laugh with anybody like I laugh with you.
Oh, that's lovely, darling.
Our trip to San Diego.
Oh, no.
And, you know, is just, this woman is a legend. So I'm one of your biggest fans too.
Oh, thank you. I actually thought you were going to mention my fart gun.
I was, but then I stopped myself.
I'm fine with it, you know. Oh my goodness. I don't want to get distracted here, but because I want to bring the audience that watch to the understanding of what EMDR is.
Okay.
Because we skipped over it, and I think it's important because it might be a really, really good one.
Yeah.
But I was traveling recently, America to Costa Rica, and back, and I had packed my fart gun, which is huge. I just think the sounds of farts are so funny. They're very therapeutic. There's nothing to smell. It's just a silly noise, you know. And went to customs, and I was bringing a Buddha through and the fart gun, and I got stopped. And so it looked like there was a baby in the bag because of the shape of it. And he put it up on the screen. I went, it's a Buddha. It's a Buddha. And the TSA, they can be such assholes, like truly nasty assholes. And this guy, he turned to me and he was like young enough to be my son. He went, I don't care what's in the bag. Now, you know me, I'm a bit of a feisty one. I was thinking, don't you give me lip sunshine, don't you, you know, but I'm like, oh God, just get through, Danny, just get through. Anyway, so he opens it up, takes out the Buddha, and then there's the fart gun. And he went to put his hand, I went, careful, it'll fart. He grabbed it and he looked at me, and He tried not to smile. He tried not to smile. Anyway, he ends up smiling and he has it in his hand and he's looking around at his mates who were putting trays through. And then he looks up and there's a man standing up above us looking down. And I went, it's a fart gun. This man, he tried not to laugh and he went, pretended I wasn't there. It was so funny.
Oh,
so
that
funny.
is lovely.
And do you remember that video we made together? It's called Two Therapists. It's online. It's called Two Therapists Discuss Dating. And does your date have an inner child? So in the same little bag were my fake glasses with the big nose and the moustache.
Oh yeah, love them.
Hairy eyebrows. They've gone missing.
No.
I tell you, they've gone missing.
Did they steal them?
I think he did. Where unto you,
that is,
yeah. I know.
That's not okay. That's not okay.
That video we made together, though, it's so funny. You know, in cartoons, when the cartoon character like throws its head back, and then that's what you do because you weren't expecting me to put them on with the big nose.
I wasn't. I know. If I need a good laugh, I always watch that.
Oh, me too. I'll try and find it, and then I'll stick it on underneath the details of this broadcast, and hopefully people will also get another giggle and a bit of an uplift because that's what we want to do. We want to bring laughter, we want to bring love, we want to bring joy, we want to bring, different modalities for you. So right now we're going to talk about EMDR.
Yes, we are going to talk about it as a tool for healing trauma. There are many tools. EMDR is just one of them. So it stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing. I bet you're glad I said that. I mean, I can barely say it.
It's a nonsense,
everything it's a nonsense. And actually, it's not really just about eye movements now, because any form of bilateral, both sides of the body stimulation, whether it's tapping or eyes, and often with people, I use auditory tones in their ears. And sometimes you can do all three at once. It's the bilateral stimulation that's important. And there's various other forms of bilateral stimulation. Walking is one of them, which is why, people often walk and talk, don't they? And we process. But with EMDR, we are trying to basically take the memory from one part of the brain where it doesn't feel like it's finished with, to another part of the brain. Trauma memories unfortunately get a bit stuck. So they, if we've gone into fight, flight, freeze, flop or friend, that memory gets held in a different section because the brain kind of thinks that it's not over yet. So what EMDR is trying to do is it's trying to budget across and budget over. And we do that by really finding out what the memory was that's creating the problem or the issue, the presenting issue, and then taking the belief that was created at the time of that memory. So EMDR really works with what we call in the trade a negative cognition. So all of us, very young, often take on all these limiting beliefs about ourselves. I'm bad, I'm not good enough, I'm unworthy, all of I'm unlovable. And then those beliefs are stored in our system along with those memories, and we keep believing them, often into our 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s even. So what EMDR is attempting to do in the bilateral stimulation is go back to that memory, work out what the negative belief was at the time of that memory, what you'd rather believe about yourself now, and then where is that feeling in the body? Where is the felt sense of that belief and that memory in the body? And how much do you feel it in the body on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is neutral and 10 is the highest? And then once we've got that, we just, bub, 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 or tap, 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 tap. And in the bilateral stimulation, what it does is it accesses different neural networks, really, and it starts knitting them together in different ways. And often it will bring up what's held in the somatic, what's held in the body, in terms of sometimes it's a running, or it's a shaking, or it's a jerking. Sometimes it can be tears. But what we're really trying to do is lessen or discharge what's in the body. And once we start to do that, you can see that the cognition starts to change. It starts to become what we call more adaptive. And eventually my I'm unlovable after enough EMDR becomes, well, no, I'm not unlovable, and neither is the child within me. It wasn't the child's fault. I'm actually really lovable.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing. So we're looking at everything in terms of belief systems, really.
Yeah.
And that they are held still in the system, even if they were 20, 30 years ago.
You know what I say to people, my most valued personal therapy that I use on people is inner child healing. Without going back into that inner child and raising them up to meet the adult that we are now, we could skip years and years of therapy just by going there.
Yeah.
So again, with EMDR, eye movement, desensitization, reprogramming, when you're going boop, 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 just so people that don't know can understand, this is where the therapist is holding a finger or a pen. And can you explain the technique, please?
Yeah, well, they might be holding a finger or a pen, or they might be holding a light bar, or they might have a box, like I've got a box with flashing lights that flash across, and it also has headphones for the auditory beeps, and also has tactile pulsators that buzz in your hand at the same time. So sometimes people will do all three, and sometimes people won't want to do the visual, and sometimes people won't want to do the auditory, or we call it kinesthetic, because tactile is kinesthetic, it's about touch. I personally like to do a triple whammy where I can and get all three.
Yeah,
get them all. One. Yeah. Turn the intensity up and go for it. Yeah.
3 months, because it is a gentle therapy. It is not jolting the nervous system. It is not electrocuting. It's just kind of rearranging the neural pathways.
No, there's no electrocution involved in it. All it's doing is it's just like tapping on each shoulder. That's all it's doing, is just to refire off the neural networks just by the bilateral stimulation. Doesn't hurt, you don't feel anything. What you might feel is that it's more effective than talk therapy, because, you know, most people are of a mindset now that talk therapy with trauma doesn't really work. Right. You know, it works to a certain extent for psychoeducation and all the beginning bit, and also the relational attunement with another caring, kind, loving human being is really important for that kind of attachment. But most of us that work in the trauma field now know that trauma is held in the body. So we've got to go into the body and do the somatic work alongside the cognitive work. You know, working with cognition on its own, just it isn't enough.
Yeah. That brings us to another therapy that I love and use, and I'm qualified in it, as you are too, and that's NLP, Neural Linguistic Programming. Now, I've noticed something out there in this nefarious time that we're in, where the people that control the planet are trying to prevent global health and healing for our brothers and sisters here on many, many, many levels. And I've heard some really negative things about NLP, and I'm like, dude, what? So here's how I use it. I will have somebody in front of me. They will say, I am trying to release being abused by my wife, let's say, beaten up for years, couldn't tell anyone, traumas in the body, made me really nervous, had severe anxiety. I was a huge man. She was a tiny person, blah, 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 blah. She threw coffee in my face. I'm talking about somebody actually that we both know, as we know. Anyway, So he was sitting in front of me and I was working with him in a therapeutic manner. And what I got him to do was, I'm like, okay, feel all the feelings just for a minute. Because I don't believe in, we've got to suffer every week with the therapist, sit in that same trauma, re-stimulate all the cells, all the toxicity in the cells. It's just so wrong to me. So you sit, you find a moment where you remember how bad it felt to be abused like that. Then you find where it sits in the body, the pain, and mostly people will say it's in their chest and heart area. Then I say, is it big? Is it small? Is it moving? Is it still? What color is it? And then what we do is the reverse to what it is. If it's big, we make it small. If it's moving, we make it still. If it's, and the color is normally black or red or gray, make it bright blue, your favorite color. And sometimes depending on the person in front of me, depending on their level of trauma, I'll have them pick their favorite song in the entire world. And I will play the song while I'm going through them, breathing into this mass that we're shifting and changing. And we always start with, when you feel the feelings, go from 1 to 10, 10 being the very worst, 1 being the best. And then afterwards, we do another grade on that scale again. And 100 out of 100, it's always moved. Because once you give people the very idea that they can self-heal in some way, they haven't got to depend on a therapist, they've got no money, they can't go to the gym. Those days of over-authoritative techniques in every dichotomy manner system, they're dead, they're done, they're gone. We're now self-empowering. Our human evolution in consciousness has leapt, it has quantum jumped. And what say you to that?
Well, I've got quite a lot of things to say to it, probably. I totally agree that even a therapist is not the healer. You don't go to a therapist to be healed. A therapist is a mirror. A therapist, our job is to bring out somebody else's own inner healer to do the work on themselves. But I did NLP training, I don't know, 15 years ago maybe, and hypnotherapy. And whilst I like all modalities and I think NLP is great, I suppose I've got a little bit of a caveat, Danny, on some things. And one of the things is with trauma and people that I work with, it's all about safety. It's all about their nervous systems feeling safe. Yeah. And so I feel that sometimes when somebody thinks that they've got to heal in a number of sessions or in a specified rate, I've had some clients and they do come back each week. They do come back each week. They do come back consistently, and I've had clients who, for the first 2 years of being with me, every time I moved slightly in the chair, they would flinch and think I was going to hit them. So I don't know how good I am now because I don't believe if you've had that traumatic a first 10 years, that you can go straight into finding that space in yourself that you can heal yourself. I think you need scaffolding. And I think good therapy is about somebody being able to scaffold their nervous system a bit up against another regulated person so that they can learn that process themselves. And that might take somebody a month, but it also might take them quite a considerable amount of time. And I don't want people to feel like they've failed. And I also think that we can change the submodalities and we can change the felt sense. But also sometimes I feel that if people can learn to tolerate and stay with it and discharge whatever is in the body and allow it up, you know, and often it will come up in, you know, in Reiki, it comes up, in shamanic healing, it comes up, in other healings. We're allowed to sit with the darkness, because it's always dark, it always feels like shit, it's brown, it's black, it's muddy, it's I don't want to go near it. But if we can start shining a torch down into it and let it lose its hold or our fear of it, that's when I think that we really can step into the light, because we're not trying to disassociate or disconnect from our body anymore. We're actually able to stay with the shadow and shine a torch into it and allow it up.
Right. You raise an incredibly valid point. And again, this is to your level of training as a psychotherapist that you truly have dealt with and deal with today and yesterday in particular. I mean, awful stories that most people would not be able to handle, Lou. And so the level of traumatized patients that you get are on a slightly different level to, you know what I mean? Just so we can preface the difference.
Yeah, they can't regulate themselves at all, some of them. And, you know, they've been using drugs or alcohol or self-harm or other really unhelpful coping strategies, often for if not years, for decades. So, you know, that type of person, I couldn't even approach with an NLP technique and go, you know, this person needs serious beginning to trust in humanity again, and like one human being that is vaguely okay. And, you know, maybe they need to see that vaguely okay human being a bit more often and time again to go, well, maybe there's some people in the world that are okay.
Exactly.
You know,
exactly. So tragic. There's more and more people coming to light who have gone through the most incredible, horrific, horrendous abuse, physical, mental, emotional abuse. Have been kept hidden, locked away. There's lots and lots more people coming through, and those that are aware of this will know exactly what I'm referring to. On the other end of the scale, everyone on the planet right now is aware of what's happening, that we're asked to wear masks, that we're asked to take medicines, that we're asked to do this and to do that. I, in particular, believe very strongly that giving your book, for example, talking about NLP, EM, is going to help people lift themselves out of this upset and shock and trauma and frustration and rage and anger and putting masks on their babies, their children, their teenagers. All those modalities will help them to breathe in and out, to understand neurological brain chemistry, to understand left hemisphere, right hemisphere, limbic system. They don't need an education in brain chemistry. They just need to understand that by breathing right into the body, by visualizing a way to self-soothe, to self-nourish. You know, that's what you and I in particular in this broadcast are looking to do. And I do want to say, while we're on these different points of therapeutic medicine for our brothers and sisters in the world, Eastern and Western, that if you are enjoying this conversation with Lou Lebentz, then please comment in the comment section, and I would love to invite her back, because this subject of mental health, mental wealth, physical, emotional wealth, and healing is one of the biggest that should be spoken about right now, not the opposite to being shut down, no conversations, let's have a frigging donut, mate. You want a donut? A bag of chips? Vinegar with that? We should be definitely having these beautiful, you know, discussions, and maybe next time we'll do a Q&A so we can invite people on live.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, so we can really figure out what it is they need and how we can love and support them and give them what they, you know, so that'll be a great thing too. All right. When you were talking about the EMDR, the eye movement desensitization reprogramming.
Yeah, reprocessing, but I, you know, just in case any EMDR gurus are watching.
Sorry.
Yeah.
People are so sensitive.
I know, they are when it's their thing.
Yes. But I invented this. But I invented breathing. I invented legs. You know, people get silly.
They do get silly, and it makes me laugh that they're all like, you know, they all start EMDR, EFT, NLP, and you know, I don't understand it. And I've been in the field for 20 years. And so anybody that's looking for a theory or a therapist or how the hell are they meant to know what all of these silly letters mean?
I know.
It's ridiculous.
It is bonkers.
Yeah, we're all bonkers.
We are bonkers. But
Yeah.
NLP, neuro linguistic programming. Now, if you look at some ancient Vedic yogic mentalities, whether it was, Kriya yoga inside the body, up and down from the spine to the third eye and out, or breathing technique, etc., you will find elements of all of these ancient, beautiful modalities in our modern day medicine and in your book.
Do you know? No, I would just like to go through it and each modality in every 56 and pull out the 4 or 5 themes. If anybody's watching who would like to do that, please go ahead. Because I reckon everything really is just re-glossed, repackaged, returned out in a slightly different way with another acronym.
Definitely. Brilliant. EFT, emotional field therapy or emotional thought therapy?
Yeah, I think EFT is emotional freedom technique, not to be confused with TFT, which is thought field therapy.
Right.
So the two inventors of that get well pissed off with us if they thought we were confusing it.
They'll be well.
Or they might not. They might be more, humble than that.
Yeah, maybe delighted that they were mentioned, but it is very, very confusing. And the whole tapping, which I'm also trained in, tapping, I don't like it. It doesn't work for me unless, I've been going through some grief and my heart was literally broken. But what has been helping me is when I've had times of high anxiety and I recognize that I'm not regulating myself, I'll sit and tap here. And it was something I recognized, my God, look at me self-soothing by unconscious, physical gesture on self, So guys,
that's a really good way of saying what works for some people doesn't work for others and vice versa, and I use tapping too. And with some people, tapping works better than the EMDR. And with others, EMDR works better than tapping.
Definitely.
So it's not a one size fits all trick horse pony thing, is it, really?
Right. And I was thinking the other day when I was taking my psychology degree, which I never finished because I did not want to continue studying Jung and Freud. I didn't. You froze at that moment. You are beautiful. Isn't she beautiful, everybody? She's so beautiful. Yeah, I didn't want to study completely. I wasn't allowed to question. I wasn't allowed to just, have a thought that maybe I didn't agree with all of the things that Freud said. And it didn't mean I was being arrogant. It didn't mean that at all. It meant that I had questions.